Elok here again. Today's date is July 7, 2017. My lesson is entitled, How is Hebrew Lost? And I'm thinking about the Hebrew language again, what we call the language of the children of Israel and the patriarchs. As I've looked into this more, and I'm continuing to do so, I've uncovered a number of things that I want to share in other videos, not just this one here, but uncovered some things that take a look at the whole language issue from different angles. But one of the things I realize is that people, even like scholars, like learned people who've been looking into this for a while, people have just bounced all over the place. Some are wondering, like, what language do they really speak? And there's all kinds of arguments. So, I'm just questioning it, because if people seem so not settled, then why is it that if you're reading the Bible, you just have to accept that it is Hebrew, because somehow Hebrew was actually, revived again recently? But I'm wondering, when you say the Hebrew has been lost, but now it has been revived or is brought back, the question I'm asking now in this video is, in what sense was Hebrew lost? Or in what sense is Hebrew a lost language? Does that mean it's lost because nobody is speaking it anymore? Or is it lost in the sense that it has always continued to be in use, but just not properly? In other words, it became corrupt. So when you say it died out, that may mean that it completely stopped being used, or may just mean that it was only used by a few in certain areas, or in special situations, right? But not just as a common tongue anymore. So I was looking up a word for lost in the Hebrew, in the Bible. I know there are a couple of words, but my attention fell on one particular one, which I'll look at in a moment. But I'm reading here from Psalm 119 and verse 176. It says, I have gone astray like a lost sheep. So I've gone away like a lost sheep. Seek thy servant, for I do not forget thy commandments. As I thought about that, it just came to me that in rereading the Bible, I'm starting to think that the commandments go along with the language. That's just my thoughts. Whether it's right or not, that's the sense I'm getting. So the commandments, keeping of the commandments, goes along with the language, but it also goes along with the people, the nation, and goes along with the covenant and the agreement the Most High made. It's like it's all one package. Because if he cut a covenant with the people, it was done at a certain time. It was done in a certain way, done with a specific language. Like he wasn't speaking, from what we read, in 15 different languages to Moses on Mount Sinai. He wasn't speaking in 20 languages to Abraham, and so on. Nothing makes us think that he was speaking in 500 languages to Adam. So there would have been a particular language. And as a part of the whole coming together of the covenant, nothing can be removed because the Most High doesn't do anything without purpose and reason and so on. So one, he would have a reason for choosing that particular language. And when you see that the language being lost is a part of the curse, that tells you that the language itself is very important. So to see some Hebrew cropping up at about 1000 BC, around about the time of David and so on, and for the Hebrew, basically meaning it's newer, because Adam wasn't speaking it, Abraham wasn't speaking it, this Hebrew that they're telling us about, but also to see that the Most High is saying in Zephaniah 3:9 that he's going to restore a pure tongue, a pure language, is letting you know that somehow a curse has happened upon the language or upon our use of it, so that either we're not using it anymore or we're using it but not in a proper way. So whoever is out there that has possibly maintained the language, maybe in small secluded groups, but can't be very vocal about it and very public and so on, it is just not available in its proper, original manner then, right? And we do know languages change over time as well too. So if the Most High says he's going to restore a pure tongue, it could mean that the language, when you say Hebrew has been lost, it could mean that the language has been in use all along and never died out 100%, but simply became corrupted, changed over time. And so he's going to bring a restoration. Possibly, it could be like that. It could also have just, fully died where nobody was using it anymore, but people know of it. But he says, I have gone astray like a lost sheep. And while there are other words for lost, like I said, this one in particular, abad, this one got my attention only because it just kind of runs in line with some of the other thoughts that I was having with some other scriptures. But the others, I'm going to take a look at that some more too. But it says here about for lost means to perish, vanish, go astray. And we know the scripture says that we went astray. So I guess maybe that's why it just kind of stuck to me. So I thought I'd look at it some more. Be destroyed, perish, die, be exterminated. So you see there, if we're thinking in terms of this lost that's in this text right here, it could mean that it's completely gone or just simply that it's been contaminated. It means to destroy, kill, cause to perish, to give up, and that would go in line, of course, with our captivity, the breaking down of our nation, because it's like we gave up our whole lifestyle initially by choice because we went astray, but we had to give it up even more fully after we were conquered. And so in that sense, it could also mean to blot out, do away with, because we went into captivity. So to do away with, cause to vanish, cause to stray. So now when you say cause to stray, if I'm thinking along these lines of straying, then Hebrew being lost could just simply mean that it went astray. So as they mixed with other people, as they worshiped the other gods of the other nations, and later on being in different captivities, began to speak the language of the other nations, then the language got contaminated, and mixing of words with one language to the next and so on, and with different dialects and so on, caused the language to stray from its, might I say, pristine form that it would have been in at first. It's a primitive root, this word abad, properly to wander away, that is, lose oneself. And the reason again why I chose this word abad is because it's saying that stuff about the astray and losing oneself. So abad here with the aleph, bet, and the dalet, it's talking about wandering away, and one wonders like and it's funny because before I started the recording I didn't think like this, but just taking a look at the individual letters, like we know the aleph is dealing with leader, and the bet can be talking about a house, and the dalet might have something to do with a door. So that could possibly mean that the leader or our teachers went out that door of the house into some other person's house that was teaching some other religion, so the house of other gods, basically, or under the tenets or doctrines of other gods. And so taught, after they went astray, they taught those things to the children of Israel, and we slowly went astray. By that happening, then the nation goes astray, our blessing is going astray or away from us, our tongue eventually goes away as well too. And one by one we're losing our kings, we're losing our knowledge of Torah, different things like that, right? So the whole thing is just going astray. And so they're saying here, this word, a primitive root, means properly to wander away. And so that would have been more of a picture of what happened. That the Hebrew was lost in the sense that it wandered away, but more so because we wandered away from Torah. And since Torah is expressed in its language and understood in its language, if we are wandering away, we're going to wander away from it as well. Because as we wander away and we take on other beliefs, other lifestyles, we have those other lifestyles and beliefs more on our mind, those new instructions. And so we have wandered away, or we've pulled away from the initial instructions of Torah from the Most High. And so there is a lessening of the importance of the words of Torah, which then means a lessening of the focus of the Torah language, or the language that Torah was given in. And the less you use the language, the less you're going to remember it, or the less your children will remember it. They have less of it to pass on, and less of it to pass on. Some of it might still be passed on, but it's mingled with other words from the other languages and so on that we're into now because of captivity and so on. And so the language has just wandered away the same way we wandered. So where the people went, the language went in same fashion as well. So we didn't go towards Torah anymore, but we wandered away from it. And so the language wandered off away as well from us. Because the language is our connection with the Torah. We understand and speak it through the language that it was given to us, and we teach it through the language as well. So if we're no longer teaching it and using it and adhering to it, then the use of the language begins to dry up and it wanders off. So in that sense then, Hebrew might have been lost in that sense, where we left off of it. Now, it also means to break, destroy, and so on. Now, my next question is, I've asked, in what sense is the Hebrew lost? The ancient Hebrew. Now think of this. They have told us that they've found a Hebrew and they're making it better, or they're improving on it, or they're going to help us learn it again by putting in vowel markings to make sure you know how to pronounce it. How do they know how it was pronounced if this was the language? I've told you this Hebrew, from what I've seen, is a Canaanite language. It's a Canaanite language. And if they've told us that Abraham went among the Canaanites and was speaking something else, it seems to me, so that they're naming him out a Hebrew as if he's different. And I don't know why, because if Hebrews were already in Canaanite territories, why are they calling him Abraham the Hebrew? It could only have been one of two things: that they're calling him Abraham the Hebrew because they've seen Hebrews in Canaanite territories before, so they know Hebrew. The problem with that is that they're calling him out in a way that makes it sound like he is unique in being a Hebrew, Abraham the Hebrew. So it seems like they're not that familiar with him, and that he's so different even in his mannerism, his beliefs, and even his tongue, his religion and his tongue. So if that's the case, then he is speaking something else. So then if he begins to speak their language in order to communicate with them, then Hebrew was not his language. It was theirs, a Canaanite language. So if Hebrew has been lost, and they're giving us this language and saying they're putting vowel pointings on it, they could very well just be giving you a Canaanite language, because if it's lost, you don't know what the real language was, so you can't tell that they're not giving you the original that Abraham might have come with, or that Noah knew, or that Adam had. You don't know. How do you know? Listen, people, if Hebrew, the experts in the world who make the mad money from the teaching and instruction and the cutting edge books written on the subject of the ancient Hebrew tongue of the Israelites and the patriarchs, if those kinds of people are telling you that the Hebrew was lost and nobody knows what it is, and so people continue to speculate it was this, that, and the other, how do these people know? And see, over in Israel, when they said they brought back the Hebrew language and they made it back up and so on and whatever, it's just so funny that as soon as they go to take over the land of Israel in the past century, it's just automatic that they just happen to remake or reintroduce the language just like that. What a coincidence. Why didn't they just sit down in the land for like another 1,000 years, twiddling their thumbs, wondering when the Most High is going to give them back the language? But they just spearhead the whole thing and just say, oh, we got the land and now we got the language right back here, right away. Here it is. We can all make up Hebrew names. You're coming from Poland, you're coming from Germany, you're coming from here, there, wherever you come from. You choose a name, this is your name, I'm going to choose the same, this is whatever. And they just get it all just in one flash, just like that. There's a nice hunky-dory, sweet, nice pie that's made and ready to eat. You can sink your teeth into it. And bam, Hebrew is there again. How do they know it is the ancient language of the patriarchs and the Hebrews? Because if the Hebrew was lost, and for all these centuries and centuries and centuries, and 1 or 2,000 years, nobody knew what the Hebrew was, till modern people today are printing books saying the Hebrew was lost and nobody knows what it is, then how is it that these people who supposedly gave us back the language were able to identify the language and tell you this is what it is, and they're putting nikuds and markings on it and so on? How? Because if it's lost, they never saw it either. So now we know Mars isn't real, but let's play with their little toy game, because all the space planets and so on are just toys for grown people. Like little children play with toy cars, toy trucks. Grown-ups play with like many moons and many planets and things like that, and spaceships and so on. So if you heard that Mars was real and life was there a long time ago, like billions and billions of eons ago, but the ancient civilization that was there, they died out for whatever reason, maybe food and drought and whatever, just dried up, all things went bad, they're gone, and the ancient tongue that they used to speak is gone. How do you know when you find their inscriptions that that is the language that was the very first language they were speaking on the planet Mars? How do you know? Because you find some inscriptions in certain places on Mars in large volume in a certain place where you know strong kings were, mighty kings were. Does that mean and prove that that was the first language of Mars? It could just mean that was the language they spoke when a mighty king was in that particular area. It could also mean that in those certain times when those metropolitans and great cities and so on were built up, that was just a language that started to be used and that took off and become the more common. They could have even had the first language right there, but because of whatever catastrophes were going on all over the planet Mars, whatever people survived and moved from the other areas of Mars and moved and came to that particular location, settled there and started to build up, they came with their different languages, and a lot of them came and were speaking. They just eventually started using the more common language of most of the people that came, and so the original language of Mars just kind of died off because they took on the language that most of the new people started to speak in that era. So let's say if you have 20 different areas on Mars, 20 different lands on Mars that survivors came from, And in all the areas, let's say in most of those 20 areas, it's the smaller tribes that came, probably no more than 500 people that survived from those areas. But in a couple, let's say in 4 of those 20 areas that were much larger, a lot more people survived from those 4 areas. And let's say from each of those 4 areas, you got like 10 million people each from each of those 4 areas survived from those 4 areas and came. So now you got 40 million people speaking a common language compared to the lesser amount that came from the other 16 areas. Then the language of the 40 million might have taken off. So when you find a lot of inscriptions, it could be for the language of those 40 millions. It does not prove that that was the original language of Mars. So when these people give us Hebrew and tell you about Paleo-Hebrew and whatever, how do you know the language in the back of your Bible, in your Strong's Concordance and your lexicons and so on? How do you know that this Phoenician stuff is the original language of the Hebrews and of the earth and so on? How do you know that? I'm not saying it is, I'm just questioning. I've told you I'm rereading the Bible, I'm thinking for myself. I never did it all my life, messed up my life. And when you deal with trying to find the Creator, I'm not playing games anymore. I want to find the Creator and come as close as I can to all these things as is possible. I must ask. I must question. I must search. Too many of us just want to believe. Belief can be very easy. So I'm just saying, after the little searching I've done so far, I haven't found anything yet that seems conclusive to me that this was the original tongue. What if it died at the Garden of Eden when Adam was being kicked out? We lost our language leaving the land. What if Adam lost it leaving the land as well? Or very shortly after? For whatever reason, it couldn't survive outside the garden. What if Adam had to move on to different territories, or his children and so on, and whoever else they had to mingle with and so on, develop different languages and so on? What if what Adam was speaking died right there with Adam, or in the time of Adam, or right soon after? Then that would mean that even Noah didn't have any way to connect with Adam's language. So by the time you get to Abraham and Moses and King David and so on, you're possibly dealing with something completely different. How do we know? Because some people are asking, what language did the children of Israel speak coming out of Egyptian bondage? Some are going to tell you it was Amorite. Some are going to tell you it's something else. Some are going to tell you it's whatever. There's all kinds of language. How do you know? And they're very convincing arguments. But most of us just believe Hebrew because somebody gave you a Hebrew. And especially if you come up with $100 and buy a nice Hebrew Bible like I did, when you start digging into those Hebrew words, they're sweet and powerful too. Let me tell you that. It's hard for you to give up that Hebrew is not the language when somebody's telling you this is Phoenician. And when they say Phoenician and Paleo, words like that, that stuff grips you in your soul, man. It's hard to get you off of that. Very hard. Let's run to Jeremiah 50 and verse 6. My people have been lost sheep. Their shepherds have caused them to go astray. See that word astray again? From above that I just told you about, which is why I chose that word lost, because it just ties more into this whole astray thing that was on my mind. So their shepherds, as I broke down the word and showed you that their shepherds or their leaders taught them the wrong way, so they went in the wrong way. So the shepherds have caused them to go astray. They have turned, and I had one silly pastor try to tell me that Israel is not the lost sheep. There's that God, he said, never called them lost sheep. Of course he did. He called his people lost sheep. He referred to them as lost sheep, that the house of Israel is lost. But anyway, he caused them to go astray. They have turned them away on the mountains. They have gone from mountain to hill. So they're going all over the place now. So it's like their way is not very clear. They're just wandering all over. They have forgotten their resting place. So now when they have forgotten it, it's because they went astray. Now, if the Hebrew language is lost or it is forgotten, that means that the people themselves, while they were alive, could not remember it. They could not reconnect with it. They lost off of it, lost off of it. Remember, even the children of Israel themselves could not at times verify their original instructions completely. Like, remember when in Josiah's time, when they found the book of the law and they had to match up, and then they realized, oh, okay, we need to tighten things up some more because they found the proper writings again. So it's like even in their lifetime, certain things were slipping away as already. So if an Israelite, without finding a book of the law, was having trouble verifying something that was forgotten of the Torah, while at the same time we're being told in history that the language was slipping away, how do people today in 2017 know for sure that we have found the language? How? Verse 7, all that found them have devoured them. See, that devoured them. You're trying to destroy them fully. You don't want their language, you don't want their tongue, you don't want their Torah, you don't want their God, you don't want their worship system, you don't want their beliefs, you don't want anything. You just want to devour these people. Let them become nothing. Psalm 83. Let's turn over to Ezekiel chapter 34, I think it's verse 4. Let me see if this is what I want. The diseased have ye not strengthened. So they devoured them, as I just read. But then, when they're devoured and diseased, you have not strengthened them. So they continue to go downhill. They've forgotten everything. They're losing off their connection with the old things, especially with the language as well. You have not strengthened them, so they never rebuilt themselves. So how do you have the language today? The whole thing was dying with them. The language is like the code that was used to deal with the Most High. So if the code that Torah was codified in has been corrupted, how do you know it today? Only the Most High can decodify the code with which Torah was written, which is the wisdom that is connected inextricably with the tongue or the language that it was expressed in. You have not strengthened them, neither have ye healed that which was sick, neither have ye bound up that which was broken. So when he says here broken, the whole thing was broken. Even their blessings were broken. Rain wouldn't fall on them enough for their crops and so on. So even their food supply was broken. Their kings were breaking down. They were losing wars. The Sabbath was being broken down. They weren't keeping that properly. Profaning the Sabbath, profaning the name was broken down. The Torah was broken down. Following everything, teaching the children the right way was broken down. The language already was being broken down. It's very clear when you read different parts of the scriptures. Everything was just being broken down. So even the tongue was broken down. And he says, you have not bound up that which was broken. Which means even the language or the knowledge of it was not healed. So how do you have it today and say you have it when it was not healed? Canaanite was 20 language, Hebrew was 22 letters. How do you know there wasn't some more letters? Your answer is going to be because the Paleo, the Phoenician, had 22. And you're still telling me about some Phoenician alphabet. Adam wasn't speaking a language that let him express anything in Phoenician, as far as I can tell. In a Phoenician alphabet, I should say. Did we find what Noah was writing using some Phoenician alphabet? You tell me well it wasn't there. I'm just saying the whole thing just looks very strange. The whole thing just looks very strange, and that's why I'm just questioning it so much. Because you'll tell me quickly this, that, and the other, but the reality is that every time I see people, just searching it yourself, people, please. When you're searching it online for yourself, you realize the answers that you get most of the times are not as cut and dried as they tell you. It is not that simple. Not that simple. You have driven them away, neither have ye sought that which was lost. Why? Because you don't want the people to survive, and you don't want anything of them to survive either. Because every little bit, including their language, every little bit of Israel that survives makes up the full or the whole of all that the people was and of all that the kingdom was. The more of the people and the more of the knowledge of them that you allow to survive, is the easier it becomes for the people to rebuild themselves and set up their kingdom again and rule and dominate, and no other king from the heathen nations want that. These people must not reconnect with their language. You cannot give this back to them, which is why the Most High says in Zephaniah 3:9, I am going to restore. Just like he's clearly showing here, I am going to be the one to seek my sheep, because nobody else is going to seek and find them. I will do it myself, because what is broken down, I'm the only one who can seek it back and put it back together. Just the case with the language. I'm the only one who can restore the language. So when somebody comes and tells you they are an Israelite, but they are not an Israelite, and takes over your land and tells you, this is your language, I'm restoring it, there's no truth in that I found in history and in the scriptures as well. Nothing that I can trust in. Now, if this Hebrew turns out to be the language, I'll jump on board with it. I'm just saying I can't find anything convincing enough. Neither have ye sought that which was lost, but with force and with cruelty have ye ruled them. Why? Because you must dominate them to the point where you can make them be what you want so they can serve you or be destroyed by you. Either they have to be destroyed where you kill them all, where they don't exist anymore, or if you let them exist, they must exist in another form or in another condition where they cannot be themselves anymore, which would mean that they become slaves and you control the mind of the slave. So that you cut them off from their history, everything. You don't even let them know that they should not be slaves. That Israel should not be a slave people. Is Israel a homeborn slave? Because Israel should not be slaves. That's why we had even laws from the Most High about freeing the slave. And don't have your own brother like a slave that the other nations do in the same manner. Why? Because Israel should not be a slave, period. We're only slaves because of punishment. Because we became lost or wandered away from. And see, look at this now. Verse 10 from Ezekiel 34:10. Thus saith the Most High Power, Behold, I am against the shepherds, and I will require my flock at their hand, and cause them to cease from feeding the flock. So even of our people who are teaching each other now, we're using the Hebrew, I don't find any reason to think Hebrew is a language. Somebody has to buy me back into that understanding. And so, as we continue to teach our people, we're teaching only by what somebody has taught us, because we're not thousands of years old. We were just born 30 or 40 years ago ourselves. So we're only teaching based on the knowledge that's available to us now. But somebody else taught us before and taught the people before us before and so on and going way back, taught us some wrong things. And the Most High is saying from way back then that those wrong teachers teaching the wrong things were feeding the flock with the wrong things. That's why the flock died and perished and went astray, because they were being fed the wrong kind of food that kept them cut off. Remember from the Garden of Eden, don't eat from this certain kind of tree, because if you feed on the wrong thing, you are going to wander away or be lost from the way of truth, from the way of the commandment that I taught you. You are going to be cut off. You will perish. You will perish, he told Adam. You will die. And so it is here when he says they're eating and feeding the flock with the wrong thing. That's why Israel died. So my flock at their hand, I will require my flock at their hand and cause them to cease from feeding the flock. Because they're feeding them possibly in a wrong language as well, which goes along with feeding the wrong truth. Because if the right language is being used, the language, I believe from what I read so far in Torah about the commandments and mitzvah and all this stuff, mitzvot, that the language is so powerful, it will start to illuminate on another level. where the world cannot contain us, where people writing their Jewish books to teach us stuff about Torah can't contain us anymore. They can't teach us stuff anymore because their books will not satisfy our appetite anymore, because the real language will make us be so that their books can't feed us. It is just not enough to feed us anymore, because the real language is going to make us break out and to say, man, that ain't no food, that's junk food. But the real language has a much more powerful food with a more powerful, real, untainted, unsprayed, non-GMO vitamins. Hebrew to me is like a GMO language. When we connect with the real powerful language, you're telling me all the children of Israel are calling, the Most High complain that certain things are profaned. So if Israel starts to call on the real name, he says in the end when we cry out on the real name, he's going to turn back to us. So people are calling the real name and he doesn't turn back? And he telling me Yah and Yahweh is his name? The Sabbath is profaned. The name issue, Israel left the land with the name issue not fixed. So how come somebody else went into the land and said they are Israel? And they get internationally recognized for that. And they're teaching you that the name is Yahweh, but you must not say the name. So they teach you that's his name, but you go ahead and say the name as well, and you don't have any power from that? And we disagree on the name? The Bible tells me, I'm going to get off the name issue, but the Bible tells me that when we are delivered, the name will, at the time when we're being delivered, the name will return. And we're going to cry out unto the name, and that's when we're going to be delivered. And then it's going to gather us. At that time will we call upon the name. What does that show? Not I will call upon the name, not you, we will. So there will be a togetherness. And the mere fact that he's going to gather us shows that we are ready and we have congregated in some manner, at least in spirit, but we have come together in these lands and unified in our minds to call on the name and access the name again, to access the power of the Most High. So when the name returns, it will be based on unity. So how come the name is here now? Because they gave it to us, and one and two of us here and there believe it, this is it, and the rest of us can't agree. The rest of us are fighting and say, no, it's not the name. The Bible tells me in different precepts that the name returns with unity. So that when the unity happens, then we will use it to call on the name of the Most High. Then I will deliver my people and I will gather you. So unity comes along with and is tied to the name. The name is cradled in unity among the nation of the children of Jacob. And it doesn't tell you that a massive group of other people are going to be using that name. So when they're telling you the name is Yahweh, but you must not say it, and they're using it as well, the Jewish people know something is wrong with that. We are going to be using the name when it returns. But to get back here to Ezekiel 34 verse 10, partway through the verse, I'm going to take them, my flock, out of their hand and cause them to cease from feeding the flock. Neither shall the shepherds feed themselves any more, for I will deliver my flock from their mouth, that they may not be meat for them. Then he says, for thus saith the Most High Power, behold, I, even I, will both search my sheep and seek them out. I will search them and seek them out. See, so what I realize now is that the restoration of the sheep, just like I'm telling you here with the restoration of the language in Zephaniah 3:9, these are kinds of things that the Most High has to do. Somebody's not going to do it, especially somebody not from our nation, and say, this is the language, and we're reviving the language, and here it is Hebrew. And we're proving to you that it is Hebrew. So the rest of us buy into it and start to teach everyone just because the language is so powerful. It doesn't mean that other languages weren't powerful while the Israelites were up and running and while the patriarchs were, living and so on. Other languages were powerful and they were striking as well. So did they just pick one of these languages and give? And then, by the way, when you deal with the Phoenician, now they're telling us this is Paleo or Phoenician Hebrew. Well, I'm starting to look now. I can't speak much of it now because I'm only just starting this part. But by the time I look at Phoenician and Lebanon and so on, you're dealing with, even though Israel went into those areas and so on, you're dealing with group of people that was using language for and using it to express certain evil kinds of things and so on. But like I said, I gotta do that some other time after I learn some more about it, right? So it's funny that they're dealing with these kind of languages like the Phoenician and so on, rooted with an evil people for what I see so far, and then it turns out now to be offered to us as the language, Phoenician. Anyway, he says, I will seek them out, and so on. In other words, he's going to do it. So he says he's going to restore the language. He says he will gather the people, right, and so on. So it's like when the covenant is broken, he says, you broke my covenant. I didn't break it. You broke it. But he says, I'm going to restore my covenant. I'm going to renew my covenant with you. So it's like everything that has been broken, no one of us, especially not someone from another nation who is internationally recognized by the other governments of the earth, are going to present that language to you or do these different things that need to be restored. The Most High says he's going to do it. Why? Because he's going to do it in a way where nobody can deny. Because when somebody presents Hebrew to you and puts some vowel pointings on it, some of us might deny it. So he said, no, I'm going to restore it to you. I will give you the language. I will restore a pure language. When somebody's gathering people on ships from Poland and Germany and different places and say, Church of Israel are coming back together. No, the Most High says, I will gather my people, myself from different lands. Isaiah 11, 12. Why? Because he's going to do it in a way where it cannot be denied. It cannot be denied. So when truth comes, it cannot be denied. That's why the Most High says, I will do it myself. Like here he says, even I, will both search my sheep and seek them out. As a shepherd seeketh out his flock in the day that he is among his sheep that are scattered, so will I seek out my sheep and will deliver them out of all the places where they have been scattered in the cloudy and dark day. Let's run over now to chapter 37. Ezekiel 37 and verse 11. Then he said unto me, Son of man, these bones are the whole house of Israel. These bones are, behold, they say, our bones are dried and our hope is lost. See that word lost again? Because everything was broken down, it went astray, it was destroyed. We are cut off for our parts. Now, when you look at that, we talk sometimes about the parts. Okay, so continuing here, so let me read Ezekiel 37 verse 11. Again now it says, Then he said unto me, Son of man, these bones are the whole house of Israel. Behold, they say our bones are dried and our hope is lost. We are cut off for our parts. And then he goes on to saying, prophesy to the bones and so on. Notice he's saying prophesy. Why? Because again, a tongue and a powerful tongue would be needed. Because everything that was powerful that the Most High did came through a certain language that we all call that initial language. And some of us say it is a Lashawan Kadash, however you want to pronounce it. But we usually believe that there is a certain tongue. Even people in all these esoteric wisdoms and all these different kind of Egyptian teachings or hidden wisdom kind of religions and so on, usually believe that there was some kind of language that had to do with initial things. And so when the Most High is saying, prophesy, and he's going to speak to them words, he is trying to restore something, which is the reason why he's saying prophesy. So he's dealing with words again. So we understand that if the Most High was dealing with a language and the children of Israel went astray and their whole kingdom just died down, the first step he's taking to seriously addressing the restoration of the people and the coming back to life is something that has to do again with language, because in order to speak or prophesy, they have to speak something through language. Because Torah is the life that's going to be prophesied back into them and give them life, because Torah itself is the life that Israel lives by. It lives off the life that is in Torah. And when the life comes in, they're going to have to understand it in a language and communicate it as well and understand what has happened to them. So when the nation comes back to life, they are going to understand the life that came into them through words in their mind, and they're going to know what happened based on a language. And I don't see the Most High restoring a language to them that was not the language He intended to begin with in the first place. And no nation on earth that is so well recognized by the government and so well printed up in massive books that are sold in bookstores that other people are making money off and not us and so on, is going to be using some language today that the Most High is going to popularize and big up when He comes back to restore the language and to restore the people. Everything about how the Most High restores the kingdom of the children of Israel is going to be done in a way where it is shocking to everybody on the earth, and everybody's going to have to stop and take note of this. They're going to be shocked. Oh, this is the people? Oh, this is the land. Even some Israelites today studying the stuff in our captivity, we're not even sure of all the lands that really belongs to Israel. Some of us read the scriptures and we can figure it out. Others of us don't know. And others of us, like myself, know it and can't remember all the lands. I know, well, you got the land of Israel, and you got all are part of Egypt. I think it's probably part of Egypt. You got Lebanon, maybe all are part of Lebanon, and so on. Like, I can't even remember all the different territories, but you see what I'm saying? So we're not so sure of all these end time things, because the Most High has set it in a way where He is going to be the one that clarifies everything, because the people who actually were involved in taking us down do not want the fullness of truth to be known. So they're not going to print these things in a book and just tell you outright, and this is their language. No. But the Most High is going to do it in a way where people are going to realize the truth has been hidden all along. And in our churches and our mosques and our whatever temples and so on, we were being taught the wrong thing. Something that looks close to the truth, but it wasn't quite the truth. Just like the New Testament looks like the Old Testament because it has Old Testament stories in it, but it is not the truth. It is not the Testament. Just like Hebrew can look like the real language, but as far as I can tell, is not the actual language from what I'm seeing more and more. You see what I'm saying? Just like another people who call themselves Jews today look like the people, but some of their own people are writing books coming out saying that they are not the original people of Israel. So a lot of doubling up has happened where something that is not quite the thing is presented to the world and publicized to the world as being the thing, but is not quite the thing. It just looks like the thing. Looks like the real thing, but it's not. But the Most High says, I will restore the real thing. So the language is kind of fishy to me. So when He says now, these bones, the whole house of Israel, behold, they say, our bones are dried and our hope is lost. Well, if the language is restored to us, why is it that prophecy deals with the speaking of life? And we have been given the speaking of the language again as Hebrew, and the teaching of it as the Torah from the Jewish people, and even people in Africa who say that they are the real Hebrews, they're teaching Torah as well, yet still the life isn't coming back into us. Because something is not clear, and I've yet to hear one single person, without regard for anyone, but not cursing anyone, because I'm in the picture, I'm in the number as well. I've yet to hear any one person that I've ever heard of or read from that has taught the Torah the way that I'm getting the sense that it should be, and I don't even know the fullness of what it should be. Because everyone has taught something that is either obscure, either incorrect or not quite clear. So even those who have many more years and are more well-versed, even when they're teaching something properly, they still can't be as clear as they need to be. Because full clarity is just going to come in the end. And so we continue to search and improve the way that we communicate it, even those great teachers among us, because we're looking for more clearer ways to explain it to the people that we're teaching. So when He says, prophesy unto them and say unto them, I will open your graves, come out, and so on, and whatever. He's saying that because He says, look, by the time you get the stuff restored to you, and prophesying is going to include your language and your tongue. That's why He's saying, I'll restore a perfect language, because He's prophesying everything. When Torah gets prophesied back into us to make us be renewed again, to renew the covenant, to renew the life in us, that means Israel is restored now. Because if life is coming into you, then that's your restoration. Well, how are you going to be restored without the language that cut the covenant? That explains the covenant in its fullness. Because you tell me, I cannot understand fully the language, fully the instructions of Torah in the English because it is not the language. I actually going to puke if somebody comes out and tells you English is the language. Now I'm just messing with you. I'm not telling you that. I'm just showing that just for humor and just to shock nature, right? Because you gotta just change up your mind sometimes to kind of examine some of these things because so many lies have been given to us. But if the language itself is so powerful that you cannot use another language like English to understand it, then it tells you that the language is an integral part of the restoration. So in Ezekiel 37, if you are being restored, then language is coming as well. And so he says prophesy or speak, because speaking is the first part of deliverance and restoration. So when he got Moses to say, come deal with my people, they're in Israel, they're in Egypt, go take my people out, and I'll send 10 plagues and so on. In order to begin the whole thing with Moses, he had to speak to Moses as well. When the children of Israel were looking for a deliverer to come to see what kind of deliverer, they were consulting the Torah, looking in the language, the earliest language that they had in the Torah copy that they had at the time. Why? Because they have to consult the language or the language to figure out. Because the language itself, they have to figure out how different things are written, which means the knowledge of the language has to be strong enough to find the fullness of the truth so that they don't trust in the wrong deliverer and mess themselves up. Let's say they have to revolt because they know this is their deliverer, their Mashiach as you call it. And it turns out to be the wrong Mashiach. It's not the right thing that's coming to deliver them because they misunderstood based on the wrong language or based on not understanding the language properly. Then they're going to revolt at the wrong time and end up being slaughtered when they realize that particular king is not their deliverer and he doesn't deliver them. And then the people they're revolting against, they end up slaughtering them. So proper knowledge of the language must be there. So when he says prophesy unto them, there's got to be some real language that is the original stuff of the covenant to bring back the original life. Because if it's not original, it is not life to begin with. And shall put my spirit in you and you shall live, and so on and so forth. Okay, let me close out here now with very, very popular stuff we know from Psalm 83. Though, verse 2, Below thine enemies make a tumult, they that hate thee have lifted up thy head. So, okay, they hate you. Taken crafty counsel against thy people. See here the counsel again. So they're working together, they're discussing stuff, and they're talking about it, and they're deciding on the course of action, how to approach this children of Israel. This seed of Jacob. I was going to say Jacob. How to deal with this seed of Jacob, to take them down and to keep them down, so that having gone astray, they will not find the right path. And you don't think they're going to mess up the language? They will not reintroduce the right language, because if they're taking crafty counsel, then they will not use a righteous language back with the people, introduce a righteous language back with the people in 2017 or in the 19th century or so on, to tell them here's your Hebrew language back. Why? Because the right language is about righteousness, a right doing thing, so they would have done something right by the true children of Israel by letting them get access again to the real language, and that will empower the people, and that will not work to bring about their crafty plan. Their crafty counsel would then be weakened to become crafty, to become shrewd, and so on, right? So they're using this kind of counsel against the people and consulted against our hidden ones. And have said, come, let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel shall be no more in remembrance. Now, if you're giving them a wrong language, are their name going to be in remembrance in the same proper way? No. First of all, they're not calling their name in the right language, so immediately they're just wrong. You're telling me even in English, Israel is just the wrong name. It should be Yasharal or something else. You see, even English being the wrong language doesn't even cut it. You're telling me I must find the right language, Hebrew. Well, if Hebrew itself is not the right language, let's just imagine that it's not, because this is just my consideration of the whole matter, and my speculation of the whole matter. So if Hebrew is not the real original tongue of the children of Israel and of the patriarchs and so on, then giving them Hebrew as a part of crafty counsel ensures that the name of Israel be no more. And some say Israel is not even the real name anyway, but that's not a topic I can handle. But if they are correct, if they are, then hey, could it just be Israel? Because, I don't know. That's for somebody else to deal with. But you can understand that on all sides we have been attacked and hit. And I don't see how the language of the children of Israel is going to be left alone and intact, so that all the other languages of Canaan are going to be gotten away with and destroyed. But somehow the Hebrew just manages to be the only language that survived, and somebody's just going to pick it up and offer it to the world again and give it to us, knowing that the children of Israel are in captivity and they enslaved us, and they're going to give it to us so that we can now, in slavery, now that we're allowed to earn a few dollars, buy a $50 Bible and figure out the Hebrew and get back our language just like that. And they're using crafty counsel to trick us non-stop, so that the Most High says he has to come and deliver us ourselves. Why? Because the crafty counsel is so strong and united against us that we cannot figure out the way to get out of this captivity. So he has to do it. Because the counsel is so crafty, he says, listen, I'm going to have to restore a perfect language unto you. Why? Because they've given you a crafty language. It's just so by coincidence, it seems, that all the languages of Canaan are gone, or most of them, or something like that. And it just so happens that the one that remained intact is the one that Jewish people just so happen to say is the language. And here we're giving it back to you. We're going to put some vowel pointings on it to help you figure out how to say the words. It's just by coincidence, isn't it? Think of it. What an astounding coincidence. And finally, you're telling me that the Most High is going to restore a perfect language. That of all the things he says about restoring us, he has to throw in language in there, letting you know that there's a trick with the language, my people, and you must always keep that in mind. Never forget that there is a trick with the language, to the point where I have to restore it. Which points to a new beginning, because if he's restoring it, it's coming at a time of restoration and a new beginning for Israel, for his people. And wouldn't you guess that the first time there was a beginning or a new beginning, in the beginning, when he made heaven and earth, and when he made in the beginning the first man, Adam, then in that beginning he breathed in Torah into him and was speaking a particular language. And after they went down, all kinds of things happened. Next thing you know, we were wondering from those early days, what is the true language? That means that at the beginning a certain language was spoken. Well, when there is another new beginning again in the end, like in Zephaniah 3:9, he says I have to give back a language. The language comes when there is a new beginning. Israel is still in captivity. There is no new beginning for us right now. I highly doubt that we have been given the language as this Hebrew that we've got, or even as Paleo-Hebrew. I highly doubt it. Thanks for taking the time to listen to me.